Life is a rough business. And I want to say this. I know people like catching feelings, as it were. But life is a rough business. And I'm not saying that it's rough for some, it's good for some. Everybody has had it rough. Pain spares no one. Life is a rough business, but I want to tell you this quite emphatically and clearly. In elephantine proportions, it is hard to be a man. That's why most fall of it. That's why many die with needles in their arms. Some put guns in their mouth, the bullet out through the skull. It is hard to be a man. We are considered the strongest, and yet we die like flies. If there is anything, I was watching a show one day, and an old lady, she's quite popular. I think her husband dies quite a number of years back, and the young man was asking her, "When are you getting married?" And she said, "Never." And he asked, "Why?" He said, "Men are annoying." And he said, "Why?" And she said, "Men die. That's the last thing that happens to men. Men die." So as much as women go through a lot, it is hard to be a man, and especially if you're a father, and especially if you have no one to look up to, because most of our old men don't last beyond 60 or 70. Men die like flies. Go to family reunions, go to funerals. You will see old grandmas and old aunties, but where is grandpapa? It is hard to be a man. And the biggest problem is that they know when to curse us when we leave, but they don't know how to appreciate us when we stay. It is hard. It is hard. At least women have women's societies. We now have a man cave, yes, but women from long back had societies. When one woman was in trouble, in my language we say, but is that true? When the beard of a man burns, another man extinguishes the fire. But is that true in our situation? That's why most men implode. And the worst kind of bleeding is internal bleeding. Men die. What do we do? When you reach a point where you have tried everything, I know a lot of men that we started out with, even in work, even in construction, even just moving from one country to another. It is only by grace that you find yourself moved. Maybe you're one of them, stuck in the same place year after year. You've tried formulas set by the standards of society, and every time you find yourself stuck in the same place year after year. I'm told of a story of a Jim Becker. Jim Becker was saying there was a certain man who had a fish pond. And in this fish pond, isn't it funny? He had no family, no children, he had just come from jail. And as he was in his house, he decided to say, let me have something, a living thing to keep in my house. I can't have a dog. I'm not going to be able to walk it out, and I need to find a job to fend for myself. So he bought a fish pond and put a couple of fishes in it. He said one day, I overslept and woke up the next morning, and I found out that the thermostat had broken in the fish tank, and all the fish had boiled to death, and they were all blotted. He said, I began to think, since fish, there is some form of communication in nature, even in the animal kingdom, if you look. He said, I began to wonder, as they were boiling as this is not the norm. Whenever somebody is in trouble, something in him screams. So I wonder, in the language of the fish, with the voice of the fish, since this heat was not a familiar situation, did the fish cry? But I could not hear them. Maybe the fish cried. But because they are living in a different dimension, in a different realm, this is also for mothers, for wives, for sisters. Your son, your husband is a man, and there's a different way with which a man communicates. Men, we mostly communicate. The more stress I have, the more silent I am. The more stressed my wife is, the more she speaks. We speak a different language and we communicate our pain differently because we are different. And opposites attract. But isn't it incumbent upon each and every one of us to be able to understand, even though I can't understand, he explains his pain. Perhaps when he sleeps, he moans. Perhaps sometimes after work he parks somewhere and begins to mourn. Maybe in an Uber, he begins to mourn. Maybe in a bus or a train, maybe walking, he begins to mourn. And back at home, there is somebody who is just nagging and nagging. Now the Bible says that it is better to live on top of a roof than in the same house with a blubbering wife, than with a blubbering mother. A man communicates differently. So as he began to tell this story, he said, I wondered if the fish cried. Do you even wonder if your brother cries? But can't explain it, can't explain himself externally the way you do. If you still have a man in your house, a masculine voice in your house, you ought to say, thank you for staying, because it is hard to stay in a situation where you see other men living. It is hard to be a man. Standards are forever changing. Back in the day, father just had to work 1,000 away from home, and he was still called a good man for working for his family. Even though he was not physically available, he was financially providing, and he was called a good man. These days, they'll ask you to stay at home and still provide. But oftentimes, it's difficult to have money and still stay at home. I know there are people who are going to work every day and coming home every day, but it is not so for those who are in war. It is not so for those who are in my line of work. Because most hunt are in the wild. That's where people go to hunt and come back home. Maybe you are a man and you're thinking suicide. When a man kills a man, when a man kills another man, he kills another man. When a man kills himself in his mind, he has wiped the entire universe. You don't have to die no more. I know they curse you when you leave, but they can't appreciate you when you stay. May God gift you with a staying power. I know it is hard to stay in a situation that you have seen very few stay in. When you see everybody exiting certain places, you exit. It is natural. We're few campuses, few old men to look up to who can help us to chart the course. Who can, not that way, my man. Go this way. You don't follow women. Go that way. It's now a bunch of sissies, normal men. We are an endangered species. Perhaps it's time. I like what David said and what Jonah said. Even though it seems like nobody is listening to you, and you're wondering, will I ever be happy? Who cares about a man's happiness? I grew up thinking happiness is a low goal. For a man, happiness is a very low goal. If you see a happy man, you're seeing a sad family. Will we ever be happy? Sometimes purpose is found in pain. Do you think Jesus' goal was happiness for himself? Stop being selfish. Work for your family. It must be a choice for a woman to go to work. Leadership is deeply engraved in us. That's why you can take care of a family for 30, 50 years and never boast about it. But the moment roles change, fire comes up in the house. Perhaps it's time men have to be men. You can be going through something. Go through it. Don't go to it. Go through it. I like what David said, as much as you may want people to listen to what you're going through. Jonah said, from the belly of Sheol, I cried out to the Lord and he heard me. David said, I love the Lord. I love the Lord for this one thing. I love the Lord because he heard my cries. And when troubles arise, as long as I live, I will run to his throne. Maybe you're running to drugs. David, a king, who are you? Was running to God's throne because he hears your silent cry even when you're sleeping. He neither sleeps nor slumbers. Be blessed.